Emma Clark, here for the Brooklyn Public Library's Our Streets, Our Stories project. I'm here with Barbara Schliff, tenant organizer at Los Sures in Williamsburg. So thank you for taking time, Barbara. I really appreciate it.
All right.
And why don't we start by just tell me a little bit about where you grew up, what your childhood was like, your parents.
Okay, I grew up in Connecticut, not far away, but a whole different world. Small town, a little town, Middlebury, Connecticut. A small town of like 4,000 people at that time, probably bigger now. And, you know, it's a very normal childhood, you know, living in a small town. Never came to New York City, except we had a class trip when I was in our senior year in high school. But other than that, I'd never come to the city, and I was just like, oh, I don't want to go to the city. So when I finished college, I went to college in Illinois. When I came back, I majored in sociology, and I had heard about the VISTA program at that time it was called Action with the federal government. So I heard about it, I applied for it, and I decided to enter it, and it was to come to a city and do work, social work, or some kind of a, you know, to help people in low-income communities. And that's what I had decided what I'd like to do while I was in college. So I was assigned to Los Sures. Originally, I wanted to work with children. I wanted to work in a daycare center. When they told me I was going to housing, I said, no, I don't want to do this. I don't, you know, I don't have any interest or knowledge about housing. But anyway, they insisted, and I came, and, you know, within a month, I just loved it. You know, I loved the neighborhood, and, you know, got to know the people and the organization. And at first, I'll have to say, it was like in the middle of February, it was freezing cold. I was like really sick. You know, I got the worst cold in my life. And all the signs I thought were like in Spanish, and I didn't know any Spanish. In college, I took French, stupidly. But I didn't know any Spanish, and it was just like I was in a foreign area, but then I felt comfortable at the same time because the people were so warm and inviting and accepting. So that's how I started out as a VISTA volunteer. I was a VISTA for 1 year, then I re-upped it for another year. Then we got this program called the CEDA program in Los Sures. It was the Community Employment and Training Program, which was a federal program at that time also, and so I was hired under that to train local people to be organizers. So we had like 3 different phases of groups, and so I kind of learned on the job there about organizing and how to, you know, work with people. And I had learned that with VISTA too, you know, just kind of jumping in, trying to learn Spanish, working with people who are having problems in their buildings and trying to figure out what to do. I didn't know what to do, you know, but together we figured it out, you know, that working together as a group was the most effective. So, you know, we would have meetings in buildings that were having problems with their landlords, and lots of times the landlords had walked away, so what the tenants had to do was figure out how to run the building, collect their rents, maybe go to court against the landlord. Sometimes the landlords wouldn't even show up, so they win control of the building under the court, but then, you know, you gotta run the building. So we had to collect rent. In some cases, the buildings were half occupied. There might have been a fire. So, you know, a 30-unit building, only 15 people left, and the rest of the apartment's in really bad conditions. So, you know, we would have a little group there that was still there that wanted to keep the building, and they would get friends and neighbors to fix up the vacant apartments and actually move in and do the repairs and get credit on their rent, build up a rent roll, that kind of thing. So,
I'm going ahead of myself. Housing work, what originally drew you to, I guess, social and community work?
I don't know, when I was in college, I don't know. In high school, I took a family sociology class, and I just kind of liked it. I just liked the idea of people working together, or how people interrelated and that kind of thing. And then when I got to college, I majored in it, and I just, you know, but I thought I would go on and become a social worker or something, you know, get a degree in social work. So I looked at VISTA as kind of a, you know, segue into that. But then when I got into it, I never left.
Yeah.
So I'm still here. Yeah, crazy, but yeah.
Do you remember your first few days in the neighborhood?
Mm-hmm. I do. I called my mother and I said, I can't. It was as I said, it was February. It was freezing cold. The first 2 weeks when you're VISTA, you go through a training. We went to the George Washington Hotel and stayed there. It was like a whole group at that time. You know, I guess they had different groups. So we were the group in the George Washington Hotel. We stayed there for 2 weeks. We went through intensive training with other social workers and organizers, and it was really inspiring. You know, you came, oh my God, I'm going to change the world. This is like so great, you know. And so then we were sent to our sites, you know, and there was one other girl that came to Williamsburg with me, but she worked out of a church, St. John's Church, doing youth programs, which is what I had wanted to do. But I was at Lucerda's. But when I got there, there were already 2 other vistas that had come before. So there was, you know, there was a camaraderie. There was, you know, some people to like, what's going on? What do I do? What do I, you know, how do I? And we lived together, you know. So there was it was that. But I also was I was a fish out of water, and I was like, you know, they'd already been here a while. They were really comfortable, and I still was like, I don't know. So I remember calling up my mother saying, and I was so sick. I said, I can't stay here. They sent you for 2 weeks. After that, they sent you for 2 weeks to live in with a family in the neighborhood, which was great. But it was in the Williamsburg Houses NYCHA project, New York City Housing Authority. They had very little heat. You know, it was freezing cold. You know, it was hard. It was hard. But as I said, by Easter, you know, I came back home for Easter, you know, and I was like, loved it. Oh my God, you look like you're really enjoying it. I said, yeah, I guess I am. So it was.
What were the particular things you noticed about the neighborhood of the people you were meeting when you first got here?
What I noticed about the neighborhood, it just was dark and, you know, and dreary, and I was like, it was, you know, it was hard to deal with it. It was like, as I said, very depressing. The environment, the neighborhood. You know, it was underneath the elevated train here, and I just felt really, you know, like dark and cold and depressed. But as I said, with the people, it's a different story. So.
What were they like?
They were very welcoming. They were really, you know, like friendly and nice. And you know, as I said, when I would go to these buildings, you know, they would send me to this building, or people had said, we have problems, we need somebody to help us. So they would send me to a building. I didn't speak Spanish. I didn't know. Half the time I was getting lost. I'd go down one street and keep going down that and keep going that way until somebody told me, you're walking way out of your way. Just go this way. And I said, oh, okay, but I didn't want to get lost. That kind of thing. Because you know, I was never been in this environment before in the city. So anyway, but you know, when I would go to the building, what I would find is that if I talked to the kids and you know, made friends with the kids, they would help translate for me, and you know, then people would just be so much more accepting and see that you were there to help, not that you were there to tell them what to do. And I never felt that way because I didn't know what to do either. But you know, in that way, it was just really good. You know, one of the families eventually, I went to Puerto Rico and visited their home, you know, and stuff like that. You know, so it really was nice.
Have you learned Spanish since?
Yes. Sí, un poco.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I've had to learn. Yeah. You know, and as I said, I really didn't have. Every time I'm trying to think, you know, speak Spanish, and then French would come out, which was like, what's wrong with my Spanish and I keep saying French. So you know, and then ended up taking one course, but you know, after that it was just I had to just jump in. For a while there, I was really, you know, timid to say anything because I didn't want to mess it up. You know, like have people go, oh, I said this. But Marty, in that case, he just like didn't care. He would jump right in and say it all, and they'd all laugh and whatever. But so they said, nah, might as well just do it. So it was good.
So in those early days, then what kind of work you were being tasked with doing? So you're saying they would send you into a building.
Yeah, they would send me to a building, and then, you know, to go around to the apartments and see what the problems were, and then to set up a meeting with the tenants to see what they wanted to do. You know, what could they do? What were the problems, and what could we do? What they do. All that time I had to learn all these rules about rent regulations and rents, and the state rules about that, and leases. But the main thing people were concerned about was the conditions of no heat and hot water. What could they do? Could they collect their rent money and use it to buy oil? Because there was none. The landlord hadn't provided it. Or what would we do about no lights in the hallway because the landlord hadn't paid the bill? You know, stuff like that. Basic stuff. And, you know, it was a struggle. It was a real problem. But what we would do, we'd meet together. That's what we realized. You know, one person fighting their problem, their leak, their problem in their apartment, it was much better to work as a group. So, I mean, that was the idea of Los Sures, at that time too, because they'd already, local people had already kind of like started a few tenant associations, so that was really the idea, and that was what I was sent in to do.
Yeah.
So.
Was the response from the communities in these buildings generally favorable?
Yes, very favorable. That's why I said I felt very comfortable, very welcome, very, taken in as part of people's families, sit down, eat, all that stuff. So it was good. So.
From the early years, do you remember any particularly challenging cases that you're dealing?
Okay.
They're all challenging.
There was one that I'm building that I'm actually still working with, where they had already formed a tenant association. They were working with Marty from Legal Services when I came in, and they had worked with another Vista volunteer that had just finished and left, so I was working with them. And it was a building where really everyone was like open doors, friendly, it was like a family within the building. So unfortunately, we won a case. The landlord wasn't providing services. We were meeting. We were deciding what to do. They did a case in housing court against the landlord to get repairs, and we won the case called the 7A. It was to have an administrator appointed, and what it became was Losure's director, appointed administrator to run the building, which meant collect the rents, make the repairs, all of that stuff instead of the landlord. He had no right to manage the building. He still maintained ownership, but he couldn't collect the rents or enter the building. Well, 2 days after that, there was this big fire on the top floor, and it was devastating. The people had to move out. We tried to help them relocate. It was a really bad situation. Well, guess what? And they had decided, all of them, they were going to come back. We were going to figure out a way. The city was going to help us fix the building, and they were going to stay where they were temporarily and pay $1 a month so they could come back after the repair. Well, then a week or two later, there was another fire, and it was on the other side of the building. So now you had the whole roof open and exposed to the elements. So the rest of the people had to move out. So it was a really unfortunate situation. But there was one woman that stayed on the first floor. She wasn't affected by the fire. She stayed on the first floor for an entire summer. It's a 30-unit building, tenement building. She stayed there by herself and held the building. I mean, I would go over every day. We were, constantly trying to. So, and then we were able to but what happened was the same people never got to come back in after that because it was just too devastating. It took too long. They ended up getting other apartments, thank God, But we were able to save the building in a way because we got money from the city. Since we were in that program at the 7A, they gave funding to fix the roof. And then that's one of the buildings where a few people moved in and fixed up their own apartments, neighborhood young people that needed an apartment, were starting out, just had a family, or were just even single guys that wanted to fix up an apartment and have a place. So we were able to re-tenant that building little by little, doing that. And so it eventually was fully tenanted. It went into a program with the city called the Tenant Interim Lease Program, where the Tenants Association ran the building. The city then did some more repairs, put in a new boiler, another new roof that was needed by then because the other was kind of a patch-up job, and other systems, so that the building was in pretty good condition. And then they were able to purchase the building as a co-op. So today it's a tenant co-op. So it's a success story in that way, but it was a really hard, long struggle, and I still work with them to this day, helping to run the building as a co-op. So yeah.
How has your work sort of evolved and changed in the organization since you've stayed here and been here?
Oh, well, it's changed a lot in the last few years. I mean, as the time went on, I became the director. The organization formed units like what we called the Housing Resources Unit, which was the organizing and tenant advocacy. We had management. Losudes does a lot of management, rehab, and development, and then there was a development unit. So there were different units like that, and I became the director of what they call the Housing Resources Unit, which was the organizing unit. So we were able to get funding, other Vista volunteers for a few years. We were able to get funding through foundations over the years, different foundations and banks, and then some money from the city also. The city had several programs in the 80s and 90s to deal with problems that like neighborhoods like ours were facing, such as abandonment, arson. We had a program with the fire department for they call it the Red Cap program that was do investigations on fires. You know, it was all that kind of stuff. We had close ties with the police on drug activity that was going on in the neighborhood. They had the CPOP program, the community policing program. But the funding came from foundations, some from the city, some from the state, the neighborhood preservation program, and Los Sures also, since we managed buildings, we got some management fees, and some of that money would go towards the staff, the organizing staff. So at one time we had a staff of five organizers, so that was pretty good, and an office assistant to help us with, because we had some of these buildings through the city, we had to do a lot of bookkeeping and reporting, rents and income and expenses. So we had a pretty large staff. Now we have a staff of 4 organizers. Last summer we were down to 2 of us, so it goes up and down depending on the funding. Yeah. So I was the director of the unit for many years, and then a few years ago, for various reasons, I decided to step back and become an organizer. So now I'm an organizer, so, which I enjoy actually. I don't really enjoy the administrative part of it, and you know. I just said, after all this time, I guess I should do what I really like to do, or, you know, which is organizing. One time, we have a contract now, though, that requires us to do a lot of individual work, which is, you know, helping tenants fill out SCREE applications, senior citizen applications, and there's other applications, helping them review their leases, but, you know, individual assistance, too, so we do a combination. But I still work with a lot of buildings. I work with a lot of buildings that became co-ops, helping them run their buildings, meeting with them on a regular basis, trying to keep the boards working democratically rather than 1 or 2 people running the show, which is not easy. And, you know, I still work with some tenant associations that have rent strikes going, and we have cases in housing court, all of that. So. Mm-hmm.
Have the issues that are most prevalent, I guess, that you deal with, evolved over the years?
Yeah, I mean, the neighborhood in the past 10 years has changed dramatically. From a neighborhood where no one wanted to live, people were just, if they could, they were fleeing, or, you know, they had to because they had no place, you know, their apartment had burned or whatever, to a place where everybody wants to come, you know. So that part of it has changed dramatically. What hasn't changed is that the landlords want low-income people out. And the people that we've helped to organize and that have worked and struggled for all these years to improve their buildings, run their own buildings in many cases, and really struggled are now being priced out of the neighborhood and in fact being harassed to get out. So it's kind of turned that we're doing the same kind of thing of helping tenants stay in their apartments, but it's not that the landlords walked away, it's that the landlord's there. You know, we can't win a 7A case in court now, even though the tenants don't have services and repairs, because the landlord's not walking away. They'll come to court and say, no, I'm going to fix everything, I'll fix them, and they fix a few things, and then the case stalls, and it just takes forever, and we haven't won a case in a while, that drastic of a case. But, you know, so you'll see this, you know, like they say, tale of 2 cities, a tale of 2 buildings, you know, within the same building you'll have the long-term tenants not getting, you know, getting minimal repairs if at all. Sometimes, like I said, having to do a rent strike or go to housing court in order to get repairs in their apartments. And then you'll have people that have come in new that have completely renovated apartments in the same building. Completely, you know, you walk in, you think you're in a thing out of a magazine, you know. So it's a really strange thing. And so that's the kind of, that's what we're doing now. We're trying to help people stay in their apartments, preserve their housing, realize that they can't be harassed. The constant, you know, landlords are asking people for buyouts. You know, I'll give you, start out with $2,000, then they go up to $5,000, and now they're even talking $50,000. But people are realizing that sounds like a lot of money, but then where are you going to live? Because you're not going to be able to rent wherever you go. If you rent a new apartment, the rent is going to be triple what you're paying, and that money will go in no time. So that's another thing we're trying to educate people about, you know, so that they know what they're getting into if they decide to take a buyout. You know, hopefully they won't do it. So that's how it's changed. You know, it's like it's the same, but it's trying to help people stay in their apartments and get repairs and live, you know, in a decent condition. But it's for a different, you know, it's a different kind of like, the enemy is the same but different. I don't know. It's hard to explain.
The enemy has changed tactics.
Yeah, there you go. They've changed their tactics, so we've had to adjust our tactics also.
Have you found that most families, I assume, want to stay?
They want to stay, but it's like a struggle to do so. So as people get older, and you know, I've been around them long enough where, as I'm aging, so are a lot of these other people, and some of them want to retire and go to Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic, or their kids want them to have moved to New Jersey and want them to move, you know, that kind of thing. So those people, in many cases, they want to move. But the sad thing is that many of these people's children brought up in this neighborhood can't afford to live here now, and that's what's a shame. So they've had to move out to Pennsylvania, New Jersey, you know, other parts of the city, and you know, it is a shame. But that's one of the things we do with co-ops, is try to have people realize, you know, this is an apartment, you know, you can save it for your children, you can have it, you know, in the family, and people are realizing that, you know, because there's a big push there too. I can sell my apartment for $500,000. Why not? You know, but some do, many don't. The ones that I work with pretty much don't, because they understand the program, the idea of it was maintain affordable housing. But there have been instances.
What do you think has, I guess, not kept you here is a weird way of putting it, but I mean, throughout the years of your working life, kept you in this neighborhood doing this work?
I don't know. I can't really answer it. I'm not the only one that's done it though, as you know. So it's not completely crazy, but or there's a few of us that are crazy. I don't know what to say. But I don't know. It's like I've often thought, you know, that I know other organizers from other groups, and you know, they've worked with several different groups over the years. You know, I've worked with this group, and I guess I've just gotten so enmeshed in this neighborhood and the people here that you know, it's like I wouldn't want to do this with another group. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to do organizing and go to another group in the city, even though they might be a perfectly valid group. I don't know. I guess it's, there's so many things that you get involved with that it just like you don't really ever finish, which is not really good, I guess. But you have victories along the way, and it's worth it, I guess. I don't know. I just feel that it's worth it, and I get satisfaction from it myself. So, I don't know. People, you know, it's not just that they appreciate what you do, but you feel like you're accomplishing something, you know. I can't really give you a good answer there.
And I mean, since you saw this neighborhood from when you first arrived here, obviously there's the thing about prices, but how would you describe the changes in the neighborhood, how it looks?
Well, physically, it's a completely different place. When I came here, every block had at least 2 or 3 vacant lots, or completely empty, burned-out buildings that were just sitting there for years, open to the elements, you know, like, and then they became havens for drug activity that became rampant in the late 80s and early 90s. There was a lot of stuff going on the Lower East Side, and there became a connection across the bridge. And, you know, all of that was going on all the time. And luckily, I never really felt like in danger or anything, because people knew I wasn't here to, like, you know. But we did work closely with the police. They would come to the office, the policing, and we would have tenants come in that wanted to talk to them about what was going on in their neighborhood and stuff, like in their building, that they were concerned about, that didn't want the police coming to their apartment to say, you know, what's going on. So they would come into the office. That kind of thing. So, but physically, it's just really, now you have very few vacant lots, no burned out buildings. We once did a tour in the 80s with all the local elected officials, with HPD, with the fire department, with the police. We did a tour of the neighborhood of all the conditions that were going on. And there were a lot of abandoned cars around. They would be just stuck in vacant lots, tires, in lines, a bunch of stuff. And we did a tour of the neighborhood, both of the physical conditions and, of course, some of the buildings and what was going on. By the time we got finished with the tour, they were taking the cars out of the park that was filled with abandoned cars. So we were so appalled about it. But it was like we had to put a spotlight on the neighborhood because the city had just forgotten about it and just like let it go. So we were glad when the city started paying attention. Cleaning up the vacant lots. But I have to say that the rezoning that occurred in 2005 had the dramatic effect, and that's what kind of started the whole change, which in a lot of cases is not good, because that's what started the displacement going on, and the skyrocketing of the rents and the development, not just along the waterfront, but in every vacant lot, and started this luxury housing type of thing. So, it's just a shame you see all these buildings going up, which is great. So not abandoned lots anymore, but nobody in the neighborhood can afford to live there. There's no way.
Does the neighborhood feel different at all?
Oh, yeah. It feels so much more sedate and nice, like that. Yeah. It's lost its edge. Definitely lost its edge, I mean, it's safer. There's no more crime. There's not much crime. But there's a lot less crime. The drug activity, what there is of it, is inside the buildings, not outside. I mean, we have buildings where at a certain time every day, people would line up in the street to go in and buy drugs. It was just, it was like blatant. So it's a little strange because some of the newer people that have even come to the organization, they have no idea. You can't expect them to, and you can tell them, but they just don't know what it was. So,
What do you? This is a large question. I guess what do you hope to leave behind in this work in this neighborhood?
Well, I hope. I don't know. I mean, one of the things that really is kind of troubling is that, we've done our job too good. The neighborhood is so desirable, and I hope we don't leave a legacy of luxury housing and only for the rich. That's what I'm a little concerned about. That, really, helped a generation live here, but then the next gen, after that it's kind of gone. And people will say, too, these days, when they're talking about East New York or other areas that are set to be rezoned, like, oh, don't let it be Williamsburg. We can't have it be Williamsburg. It's like they write us off like it's already gone. And I always have to say, it's not gone yet. There's plenty of people here. We're still working with, a lot of low-income people that have been able to preserve and improve their housing, and they're still here. So, I try to be optimistic in that way, too. But, a lot of people that would say it's gone. And if I walk around, I see more and more people that are not, newer people walking around. It used to be in the north side, then a few blocks down from there, and now it's all over.
You're almost about
Okay.
time. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Yourself, your work, the neighborhood, that you want to tell people?
Well, I have one thing I would say, and this is why I'm thinking about it now, because we have a few new organizers that are very young that have come and are very idealistic and like going to change the world like I thought I was. Is that you've got to look at not that you should tamper your enthusiasm or look at the defeatist attitude, and I think they're sometimes thinking on that way, like you can't like that, right? But you got to take little victories, small victories, and see that those are good too. If you helped one person stay in their apartment or get repairs or not have to worry about being evicted, that's a good thing too. I mean, we like to organize, we like to save whole buildings, but it's a good thing to help individuals also, and sometimes those smaller victories lead to bigger ones. But you have to be, satisfied sometimes with the smaller things, and then, you know, not just be worried about the bigger stuff. Although we've done some big stuff. You know, we took over the Berry Street houses in the early 90s. We did fair housing marches and took over different projects and stuff like that. So we have done some big things, and we're having June 4th a big community meeting to try to combat this displacement stuff and get people, you know, fired up, because that's what we need to do, because there's a little bit of complacency and all that stuff going on. So yeah, that's about it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
for sitting with us.